And we'll just make our way into something that feels supportive. Kind of have a old school. See if I can get my video to work here. So just something that feels like you can be at ease. And let your spine just be greeted by the mat. All right. I'm going to feel into kind of the cycle of each breath. And with each exhale, think about the small of the back connecting just a little more intently with the mat. We just see if we can make this work out. And then bring your knees into a bent space if they're not already there. And then as you start to cycle through that exhale portion of your breath, pay attention to how the entirety of this spine is connecting or not connecting with the mat itself. And then start to squeeze into the core with each exhale so that the exhale portion of the breath is a creation of a neutral lumbar spine. And then allow the inhale to have this little bit of natural accentuation to the extension of the lumbar spine. So you get just that little bit of arch lift. Exhale becomes neutralization against the mat, flat anterior, flat posterior. And then the inhale, the breath just takes the belly into that little tiny articulation, arch lifts. And we'll just do that a few cycles here. And then the next time that you inhale, use that accentuation of the spine to extend up into a bridge. So the inhale breath gives that little articulation, and we just take that up into a nice little bridge. And then we're going to exhale that back down and feel the core squeeze and find that neutrality once again. Inhale, we lift up. that natural articulation, and then exhale. Core squeeze as we find neutral, and we press firmly the entirety of the lumbar spine against the mat. And let's just do that a couple more times. That's what I was starting to say before I had those technical difficulties. So tonight's going to be kind of a retro Patrick class. So we're going to be very linear. And we're going to really find some torso length. The next time we come up into this bridge, let's hold this, lock this in, neutralize here. So start to squeeze into the core here. Maintain the core squeeze as you come back down, and then as the lower half of the back presses against the mat, as you get that lumbar neutrality, re-engage the core even more. So we get that second level of core engagement, and then keep that this time as you lift yourself up into bridge. So instead of having the low back arch, we're staying neutral up into the bridge. And then we're going to come back down, another engagement of core squeeze, so we get that deeper cycle into neutrality. Take both arms and reach them up and overhead. Go palms up here. So overhead towards the wall behind you, not towards the ceiling. And go armpits really kind of rolling out towards the edges of the room. So you can think about a little energy, little excess energy into the pinky edge of your hands. And then recreate that core squeeze. Stay neutral as you lift yourself up. No lumbar spine change, shift. And then exhale and push the tailbone down towards your heels as you release down. And let's do that 2 more times. So we lock in the core, we feel the pinky edges of our hands, and we lift ourselves up. We stay neutral through the lift. Really think about that flat middle body. And then exhale and lower yourself down. Re-engage the core, feel those pinky edges, and then one last time, we'll lift ourselves up into this little bridge. And then one last time, we'll come back down to the mat. This time, as we come back down to the mat, we're going to pull both thighs in towards the rib cage, give ourselves a nice little squeeze. And then feet come back down to the mat, knees fall to one side or the other. We'll press ourselves up and into seat. From our seated space, we're just going to extend our legs straight down the mat and take yourself into kind of a natural fold. So natural fold just being where your body kind of falls into. No worry about how the spine is articulating. If we're going into that flexion, great. If you're staying neutral, great. Just whatever feels nice and natural for you. And then we'll walk ourselves back up to staff, vertical spine, bend the knees enough that you can engage the arms underneath the legs here. So that could be a finger interlace, it can be a wrist interlace, or it can be an opposite elbow grab. But we want to have enough engagement there that we really can compress and hold the torso to the thighs, and then just start to walk those feet away from you, heels away from you. The feet or heels can go as far as you can comfortably get them, as long as there's no break in the connection between your torso and your thighs. And we're just gonna, once again, feel into some length here. Looking for a little of that upper posterior chain expansion here. So we're trying to take the hamstrings out of the shape. We're trying to get some low back, potentially some mid back, upper back expansion, and really focusing our effort there. And let's give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. So a little bit longer hold, but trying to create some space before we start to move. Think about using the exhale portion of your breath to settle into the expansiveness, to alleviate anything that is offering kind of excess sensation. And then as you feel right, we'll walk ourselves back up into a vertical spine. And let's just transition right to hands and knees tabletop. Set yourself up for hands and knees tabletop in what feels natural. And then from natural, we're going to drop the torso. So torso drops down, but you can see as my torso drops down, the middle of the back really bows. We're going to take that middle of the back bow out, but maintain that shoulder drop. So we're really connected in the shoulders. Then curl your toes, lift your seat, and find your way back into down dog. And as you find your way back into that down dog, really just feel the restrictiveness around the shoulders. We've put kind of the burden of the shape right there. And then we're going to walk ourselves forward and find our way into fold. And in your fold, let your head go. Let your spine get long. Let your breath be easy. And then as you feel ready, let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, stacking the spine through the lumbar, through the thoracic. Eventually the cervical spine comes into the stack. The skull rests upon that stack. We're going to take the palms and roll them forward. Think about the thumb edge of the hands now kind of getting that little bit of extra accentuation back. And don't let that bow the middle of the body forward, kind of trunk space forward. So it's just shoulders externally rotate. And we're going to hold this mountain for just a moment. And then inhale your hands together at heart center. Interlace the fingers. And exhale like you're pushing your breath from that top portion of your lungs down with your hands. So the hands are just separating and pushing that breath down with the exhale. And then with the inhale, we're going to pull right back up and we're going to go all the way overhead. And as you get into this overhead space, imagine that we're drawing one line from the middle of your hands to the middle of your feet. So we're as linear as we can possibly be here. And then exhale and push that down. Elbows go out, hands separate, driving the energy of the breath down through and into the belly. And then inhale, we'll pull that back up. Taking that inhale all the way into this big overhead extension. Glutes are flexed here, quads are flexed here, core is flexed here, and we're really linear here. And then break the hand release, exhale into forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands, walk yourself back into down dog, get all the way back into the depth of the shape. Press down into those finger mounts. Now we have a little bit more shoulder capacity here than we had in our first down dog. Really translate that into length of the shape. And let's come down to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, we'll flip the tops of the feet and sink back and into child's pose. And in your child's pose, let the hips settle here. Feel that anterior hip crease. But more, feel the torso space that we've already created. So from the belt line up, I want you just to feel into that and let that musculature just relax around the thighs, around the lower half of the body. And we'll take some nice, deep, fluid breaths. It was this young woman who lives with her stepmother and her stepsisters. And they're kind of, as a rule, generally mean to her. She ends up doing all of the maintenance work, like the chores, the daily requirements to keep the home looking clean and organized. And the burden always falls upon her. When you're ready, we're going to engage the fingertips. So if they're not in front of us already, we'll make them come in front of us, and then we'll inhale and pull ourselves toward the hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we're going to curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. And then walk ourselves forward and into fold. From your fold, we'll inhale into half lift. Exhale back into that fold space. Let the torso lengthen as you let go here. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. And let's roll ourselves up once again through the lumbar, through the thoracic, really accentuating this flexion in the spine as we come all the way up into this mountain pose. We will inhale our hands together at heart center and slide our left foot straight back and into lunge. Really step back so you get all the way into this lunge space. And then interlace the fingers once again. And we're going to exhale and push that breath down. And then inhale and pull that breath back up. Exhale, we'll push the breath down. And inhale, we'll pull that breath back up. This time, as the arms reach up and overhead, think about neutralizing both the anterior and the posterior chain, and then start to squeeze those shoulders back without tucking the head or the chin. Really keeping the head neutral as we roll back into that shoulder space. And then we'll release the arms to traditional crescent so the fingers face towards one another. And we're just going to bring the hands together as we step back and into mountain pose. Let your body just absorb the stability of mountain. And then we'll interlace the fingers and slide back and into side two. Right leg steps back. With your exhale, drive that breath down into the belly. Inhale, we'll pull that breath back up all the way overhead. Exhale, we drive the breath down. And inhale, we pull that back up. And then in our top space, we once again start to squeeze those shoulders back. Remember, you want that back quad to be locked in so that as the weight is coming back in the torso, you still have the stability in the lower half of the body to keep this anterior posterior neutrality. When you can no longer create space in the shoulders, we'll release the hands, traditional crescent, and then hands come together as we step back forward and into mountain. Redistribute the weight evenly across both feet. Inhale and sweep both arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. We'll walk ourselves back into plank. And from plank, let's slowly lower ourselves down to our belly. From your belly space, keep your hands right underneath your shoulders. Squeeze those elbows in. Flex into the quads. Lift your forehead, maybe an inch and a half off of the mat. And really think about kind of from the bottom of the pec up, starting to roll up towards the shoulders and out towards the edges of your mat. So it is this upper thoracic expansion kind of bursting from that heart center space into these lateral edges. And we're just feeling that while maintaining the length in the cervical spine. So we're not cranking the neck in either direction. And then relax and just slide your hands underneath your forehead for a little crocodile pose. And just settle in. Again, feel that upper back in particular this time, the torso itself, but the upper back in particular as it relaxes into this settled shape. So this young woman is kind of constantly being told what to do, not just by her stepmom, but by her stepsisters as well. And the dynamic of the family unit is that this type of interaction is more or less encouraged. So she is always, always, always bottom rung on the totem pole, but not bottom rung on the totem pole with respect. Bottom rung on the totem pole with complete disrespect, almost as if she's a servant for the rest of the family. When you're right, when you're ready, slide your hands back underneath your shoulders, bring some strength into the musculature just above the knees, press yourself up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we're gonna once again set that torso space. So we drop the torso, then we neutralize the middle of the back, and then this time walk your hands maybe like an inch to an inch and a half forward. And then press into your fingerprints and squeeze into your core about as much as you can. And then we're gonna push back until we get some limitation in our shoulders. So the shoulders are gonna prevent us from coming back. Adjust your gaze so that it's straight down. Keep that fingerprint engagement and then try to straighten your arms in front of you. So we have active arms, active hands, active fingers, and a super active core. And then feel how we're taking the tautness and we're adding it to the system. And we want to get some belly sensation here, like we're actually lengthening the anterior of the belly tissue. So abdominal expansion, but from the limitation. At the same time, we get some lat engagement. So that soft tissue underneath the armpits running on the lateral edge of the rib cage, also super active here. This is a very strong shape, even though it's kind of a passive visual. And then we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Okay, from hands and knees tabletop, readjust so that you have a traditional wrist, elbow, shoulder stack. Curl your toes, lift your seat, find your way back into down dog. Now I have a ton of room in down dog. We have a ton of room through the torso, but you've also now just created a bunch of room around the shoulder capsule. Really get up into that lift, push the tailbone back, drive down through the handprints, and then let's walk ourselves forward and into fold. From your fold space, we'll inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. And then slide your left foot straight back and into lunge. Sweep yourself up and into crescent. Traditional crescent alignment here. Have the glutes flexed, the back quad flexed. Find your neutral torso. And then just float your hands down on the mat. We're going to take the pinky toe edge of the left foot out to the edge of the mat. So now we're in a wider version of lunge. And we're going to sweep ourselves up into a wider version of crescent. So we have that same anterior neutrality, same quad flex on the back leg, fingertips point or palms pointing towards one another. And then float those hands down to the mat. And we'll slide the left foot behind the right heel. So we're on the tightrope. So this is kind of my specialty lunge here. We're doing this with fatigue. So as you sweep yourself up, note that you're gonna have some fatigue. Note that we generally rely on these hip flexors. Now we're relying on the core. So squeeze everything in towards midline. Splay out nice and wide. Feel that back quad strength. And then float those hands down to the mat. And let's step forward and into a very asymmetrical forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Sweep yourself all the way up and overhead. Exhale your hands to heart center. And we're using mountain here just to recenter. So glute squeeze, quad squeeze. We're really finding the weight distribution. Take your fingers and interlace them, and then just push your palms away from you. So this could, if the shoulders are still restricted, the elbows may stay significantly bent. We may look more like this. If you have some more shoulder space, you can go all the way into full extension. We again want anterior and posterior neutrality. And then release the finger grip, sweep the arms up and overhead, and exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Slide your right foot straight back into lunge. Sweep yourself up into crescent. Find that stability. Good, strong front body. Good, strong back body. Float the hands down to the mat. Take the right pinky edge out to the edge of your mat. A little bit wider lunge as we sweep ourselves into this wider version of crescent. Grounded strength here. We still have the width between the 2 feet. And then float those hands down to the mat. And then we'll slide the right foot behind the left. So we end up on this tightrope. Imagine there's a line down the middle of your mat, and we're right on that. And then we sweep ourselves up into this. It's unstable, right? That's just what it is. We're so used to the hips being the stabilizing in these standing shapes. And now we're using different musculature to make this vertical position possible. Get into the depth of the shape. And then float those hands down to the mat. Step the right foot forward so that it mirrors the left. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Sweep yourself all the way up and overhead. And as you come into this top shape, again, we're dealing with some hip flexor fatigue. And oftentimes what that means is the weight wants to push forward. I'm exaggerating it, but what we don't want is for the glutes to be deactivated here. So as you get into this mountain, really feel the glute activation and then bring your hands to heart center. Keep that glute activation turned on as the fingers interlace, and we push those fingers out in front of us. Again, palms away. The elbows can be bent if we don't have the shoulder mobility. And if we do have a little bit more shoulder mobility tonight, we can go all the way to that full extension. And then we'll sweep the arms up and overhead. And exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. Walk yourself back into down dog. All right. Ton of room in down dog. A lot of space. Get all the way back into it. And then once you're all the way into the full depth, take your left foot and extend it straight back and behind you. Three-legged dog. Then we'll step that left foot forward into lunge. Ground your right heel and hug back into the anterior hip crease of the left side. You can even take that left hand, thumb kind of in the hip crease, and push that back. Then we're going to sweep ourselves up, either both hands or one hand, into this warrior one. So what we want here, we want to use all this space we've created so that the hips can point straight forward in this shape, and we can just be rooted and solid in both legs, just really rooted here, even with some hip fatigue. Then we'll spin the back heel up, right heel spins up, put the hands down to the mat, step the left foot back and into down dog, shift your weight forward and into plank, lift your seat back into down dog and sail that right foot straight back and behind you. We'll step the right foot forward into lunge, left heel grounds, and we sweep. We can use that same hand to hug back, but we're hugging back and then sweeping up into warrior one. in a way where both sides of the ilium, right, that pelvic bowl, are just rooted straight forward on train tracks. And we're just as solid as we can be in both legs. The toes are splayed out, the feet are active, the arches are active. Then the left heel spins up. Put those hands down on the mat, step your right foot back into down dog. Shift your weight forward into plank. Come down to hands and knees, flip the tops of the feet, and sink back into child's pose. As we come back into child's pose this time, not only do we have the torso space, but now because we have the hip fatigue, the hip musculature restriction is significantly dampened. We can sink back really deep into this child's pose shape. And then just settle with some exhale breaths to capture the full potential of the shape. One day, this young girl is out running her errands in town, and she comes across this flyer. And this flyer is an open invitation to the community to come to this royal gala. And this royal gala is not just any royal event. There is a specific intention, a purpose to this event. And it is that the of-age prince is going to seek out a potential partner. And she brings this flyer home and she shows it to her stepsisters, and they are clearly upset that she's seen it. They do not want her there. Last about 25 seconds here. All right, when you're right, hands slide back in front of you if they're not already there. We'll inhale and pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we're going to curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way back into down dog. And from down dog, we're going to lift our awareness to the front of the mat and step our way forward into fold. From your fold, we'll inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Inhale, sweep both arms all the way up and overhead. Interlace the fingers here. You can be palms down or palms up. Squeeze into the glutes. Get as tall as you can, including that arm print. Find all of that length. And then release the hands to heart center. With the hands at heart center, let's slide our left foot straight back. We'll find our way to lunge. And then we are going to maintain lunge. So this is a very different shape here. So the lower half of the body is lunge, and then we're going to tilt the upper half of the body so that we can lay the right rib cage on the right thigh. So we're going to take the hands from heart center and extend them overhead, index finger guns pointing away from us towards the ceiling. And then we're going to roll that down and place that lateral edge of our body right on that thigh as we push those hands out towards the front of the room. Think about that top shoulder really drawing up. And then let's blossom back up into crescent. Whew, that's a work. All right, bring the hands together, step forward. To mountain. Settle here. Interlace the fingers and bring the hands back up and overhead. Recreate that sensation. Now I have a little asymmetry in the way that our body is working. So right side of the body is a little bit more open. You can clearly see that on me. And then we'll relax the hands back to heart center. And we're gonna take this over to the second side. So right leg steps back. We find that stability of crescent first, right? So we've been working all class on this strength of stability. We find that. Then we make those index finger guns point straight up. We stay in crescent as we rotate the torso onto this thigh, and we lay that lateral edge of the left side of the rib cage down on the thigh and reach those fingers towards the front of your room. Push back into that right heel for strength. And then we'll sweep ourselves back up into traditional crescent. Whew. Step that right foot forward, hands come back to heart center. Nice work. Inhale, sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Sink the seat down to the heels, release yourself onto your seat and extend your legs back out in front of you. And as the legs extend out, we're gonna follow that forward into a fold. Again, so this is a natural fold, the natural fold that feels right for you, whether that has changed from the beginning of class or not. We find our way into this fold space. See if the area of emphasis within the body has changed. And we'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And when you feel right, when you feel ready, we'll walk ourselves back up into staff. We're gonna bend the knees and give ourselves that same interlace that we did at the beginning of a class. So this can be fingers, it can be wrists, or it can be opposite elbows. Compress the torso and the thighs and start to walk those feet out into this second fold. Second fold, really. And we'll just melt here. Now, again, ideally this fold is in the torso. And depending on, where our posterior limitations are, you may note that this has shifted up away from the lumbar to the mid back, or maybe even beyond the mid back into the upper back. It may not be there for you. It's just going to depend on how the posterior chain is responding to what we've done and how restricted we started class with. But what we want to do is we want to really, I'll say this, it will be unlikely that we've gone through the amount of work we've done tonight and we haven't changed where our chain is interplaying with this fold. So just think about where we are in comparison to where we were, and breathe in those big inhales to the maximum point of sensation, and then exhale into space. We're gonna be here for just another about 20 seconds. When you're right, when you're ready, let's bring ourselves back up. Vertical spine, staff, and then we're going all the way onto our backs. The reward of rewards here. Emphasis of today's class, although we use the strength of the legs, it really was torso specific. So as you settle back, right, this is my favorite moment in class when we get to really integrate and appreciate the work we've done. As you settle back here, feel into the way your body, your torso in particular, is responding to your breath. We started class just kind of feeling into our breath in this same shape. And we'll give ourselves about 30 more seconds just to take this in. And then as you're ready, if your knees aren't in a bent position, let's bring them there. If they are, actually, either way, if they are, if they're not, knees are bent, and then we're gonna walk the feet out to the width of the mat. So left foot, pinky edge out to the edge of the mat, right foot, pinky edge out to the edge of the mat. And then with an exhale, let both knees fall over towards the left. And then inhale back to neutral. And exhale over to the right. Inhale to neutral. And exhale to the left. Inhale to neutral. And exhale to the right. And let's just move here dynamically at your own breath. So I won't be guiding or restricting the length or duration of the movement, but really think about completely executing inhale and exhale breaths. Exhales that rotate you and inhales that return you to neutral. Let's go 2 more times in each direction. So 4 more twists, 2 to each side. And then when you are complete with absolutely zero rush at all to get there, remember that your breath, the duration of your breath may be vastly different than anyone else's in practice. When we are complete, we'll bring the knees back to neutral, let the bottoms of the feet come together, let the knees fall out wide. And now we kind of have this moment of realization for how much work we did around the hips, right? So as the knees fall out wide, there's this external rotation of the hip capsule. There's this abductor release into this shape. Settle in and trust in here. We're not going to be here remarkably long. We'll be here for about 40 more seconds. Just trust into the openness of the hips, the space you've created in your hips. So these 2 stepsisters asked their mom to make sure that their stepsister has an unfathomable amount of chores on the night of the gala. And she obliges. And the night comes, and this young woman is handed this incredibly long list of chores. When you're ready, we're going to bring our knees back to neutral. Kneecaps point towards the ceiling. That's one last time. Pull both thighs in towards the rib cage. Give yourself this compression and squeeze. Take the knees and pull them out towards their corresponding armpit. So left knee goes towards the left armpit, right knee goes towards the right armpit. We again get some of this medial hip work in, this time with a little bit more active requirement. And then release the feet back down to neutral. So 2 fist distance, kneecaps point towards the ceiling, and let both knees fall over towards the left into a little static twist. So this young woman is given this immensely long list of chores, 5 times longer than what she would ever get in a normal day. And she sees this and she sees what's happening, right? She's smart enough. She knows she's being given this list as a deterrent from attending this gala. But she gets right to it. She works through these things and she's kind of cleaning. And as she's cleaning, her stepsisters are coming in and they're messing up the work she's done. So she gets done with a room and they come in and they mess up the room. But somehow, some way, she gets done with everything. She goes to her stepmother and she says, I'm done. And her stepmother hands her another and inextricably long list. And she takes this list and she just breaks down crying. And as she's crying, she hears this like song. And she opens her eyes and there's this woman there. This like immaculately well-dressed woman. And she has this wand in her hand. When you're right, when you're ready, knees are going to return to neutral. And then we'll exhale and let the knees fall over to the second side, the right side. The woman introduces herself as the fairy godmother. And she says, they start talking about why she's crying. And the fairy godmother gets the story about how she has this huge list of chores, this impossibly long list of chores. And she wants to go to this ball. And the fairy godmother just kind of flicks her wrist and the wand, and all of the chores are done. And this woman's still kind of sad. She's like, I have nothing to wear. And the fairy godmother flicks her wrist again. And all of a sudden, this young woman is in this beautiful gown. And she's wearing these like perfectly fit shoes. They're clear. It's like they're made of glass. And she whisks herself off to this ball, this gala. And she arrives and the prince is kind of dancing with all of the eligible women. And then the prince comes to her and they immediately have this connection. And for the rest of the night, these two are just kind of at each other's hip. Last 15 seconds here. When you're right, when you're ready, knees are going to return back to neutral. Eyes closed here. Ask yourself if there's anything you might want or need before Shavasana. And if there is, offer that for yourself. If there's not, feel free to drift into a shape where you can fully and completely appreciate Shavasana. And so it becomes more and more apparent to everyone who has attended this event that this young member of the royal family has chosen this young woman. And so the night dwells on, people start to leave until it's only the two of them left in this huge ballroom. And they're laughing and they're talking and they're enjoying themselves. And it gets so late into the night that the servants of the palace start to come and clean up the place. And they see the two in there, and the prince says, oh no, don't worry, don't mind us at all. Come on in. And so they start on the other side of the ballroom and they're cleaning closer and closer to these two who are just sitting at this little table until everything else in the room is clean, except the table these two are sitting at. When you're right, when you're ready, drift completely into a state of Shavasana. And appreciate that stillness. After some time, the servants come over and they ask the prince if they can clean the table. And he says, "Oh, of course, of course." And as they're wiping down the table, one of the servants bumps into a glass of wine and it spills all over this young woman's gown. And she jumps up with just this surprising rage and she points at the servant and she says, "You witch, my sisters put you up to this, didn't they?" And she just starts berating this servant. To bring some movement to your fingers and your toes. Eventually, the prince calms her down and she apologizes and she explains the story about how her sisters have treated her so horribly. Movement up into your wrists and your ankles. And he looks back at her and he says, just because someone has treated you miserably in your past does not mean you can be miserable now. And he excuses himself and she never sees him again. Movement into your knees, elbows, shoulders, hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes. Oh, feel that fluidity in the middle of the body. Eventually, we use that middle body movement, that entire body movement, to transition from the shape we are and back into a seat. And from this seated space, we settle, we collect this anterior neutrality, posterior neutrality, eyes closed, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid. Our next inhale, we'll bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that while there is no way to fix yesterday, you are in complete control of the tomorrow you create, and see how that changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of tonight's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you. Love the heck out of you. Thanks for being here. I'll do this again next Monday. If you want to recharge, we'll be here on Sunday. Love you. See you soon. Have a beautiful week. Wow. See you guys.